who do you think are going to be some teams that are going to be in a position to acquire some players at the trade deadline? And also some teams that are going to be looking to offload some players going into the trade deadline.
Well, for the sake of the segment, I'm going to do one and one, right? One buyer for me is 100%. It has to be the Portland Trailblazers. They just made a public statement a few weeks ago about still being committed to building around Damian Lillard. You have yet to build anything around him since CJ McCollum has left. I mean, you went and re signed Anthony Simons. We just talked about this the other day. Obviously, you have Josh Hart and a couple of other players. But do you have enough assets to go and acquire somebody, whether that is future draft picks, whether that is trading Anthony Simons? You need 100% a committed number 2 star. Do you go out there and you try to get Zach LaVine? Are you going to go out there and try to get more of a competent big? Are you going to maybe package Jeremy Grant to go out and get another wing? Do you go try to package something for Kyle Kuzma? Do you go after Kevin Love? Like, there are so many names out there that you need to pay attention to, because the Portland Trailblazers right now may be sitting at 11th or 12th in the Western Conference, but for the sake of the conversation, they're merely 3 or 4 games away from being a top 8 team in the NBA, because there's just such a big backlog between seeds 5 through 11. So for the sake of the conversation, if Portland does not buy, in terms of they don't go after somebody, and I don't mean a tiny trade, I don't mean somebody that's going to come off the bench at the 8th spot or maybe a backup big for Jurkic, you need a significant splash to show Damian Lillard at 32 years of age, you're not wasting his damn time. And in terms of sellers, it's got to be, coincidentally, we just talked about him, Zach LaVine's team, the Chicago Bulls. They tried to assimilate a big three of their own with DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic, and even going out and acquiring Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso. That has not panned out whatsoever. Yes, they made the playoffs last year, but each of them outside of DeMar DeRozan has had significant injury history. Alex Caruso was hurt last year for a little bit. Zach LaVine's been in and out of the lineup. Obviously, Lonzo Ball's been dealing with a knee injury for the past 2 years. Vucevic is just a shell of himself from what he was in Orlando. This just was one of those big acquisition off seasons or trade deadline acquisitions a few years back that just, it aged poorly. Zach LaVine has been linked to the trade deadline the last 2 to 3 years since he's been in Chicago. Each time he's remained with the Bulls, whether that's because of a contractual obligation, because they couldn't find the right trade package or what. Chicago's got good young pieces, aside from DeMar DeRozan, of course, and Vucevic. Each of those players has a lot of years left. I mean, the only issue is they just have a checkered injured history. So if you're going to go and trade somebody, it's got to be somebody that's currently healthy, because I'm pretty sure in the NBA you can't trade somebody while they're hurt. And if not, they got to figure out what they're doing, because there's just absolutely no way they can win with what they have now as it's currently standing.
Yeah, for me, when I kick it to my buyer and sellers, I'll do the same thing that you did. I'll just pick one team that it's going to buy and one team that I think that's going to sell to offload some players. So I'll start with my team that's going to focus on trying to acquire somebody before the trade deadline. And I'm going to go with the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors, I think, are in a position where I think they need a move to shake up the roster a little bit, because, I mean, let's face it, Golden State is coming off of a championship last year. You know, that group of Steph, Clay, and Draymond, they have 4 championships to their name, but this year has been a struggle. And you could definitely tell the injuries have been a prevalent part to their lack of success this year. But even when they're on the court, they just haven't been as effective and productive as they have been in years past. You know, you're still getting good contributions from Steph, Clay, and Draymond, but to me, there's definitely some room for improvement on the back half of the roster, especially from the bench. And I think when it comes to the Warriors, one person that I'm looking in particular to possibly improve not their offensive capabilities, but their defensive capabilities is Matisse Thybulle. I was reading some reports before we started recording that teams like the Warriors and the Sacramento Kings are interested in Thybulle. And Thybulle definitely brings a defensive presence that I think the Warriors are lacking right now. Because when we look at the last couple games that the Warriors have been playing of late, they have been giving up some pretty big point totals. I believe they played the Timberwolves a couple days ago, and I believe they gave up over 125 points. And, you know, look, Golden State could score, but if you're giving up over 110 to 120 points per game on the defensive side, that's not a winning formula. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Warriors are going to be in a position where they look to acquire somebody. And I know Matisse Thybulle's name has definitely come with some reports, and we'll just kind of see as we get closer to the trade deadline, since we are a week away from that trade deadline. And then for my sellers, I am going to go with the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are underperforming this year. The Raptors are a sub 500 team, and there have already been a lot of rumors circulating about some of their personnel on their roster. We've seen guys like OG Anunoby be involved in trade rumors. We've seen also Fred VanVleet's name be mentioned in trade rumors. And if things do not improve with Toronto's season in any significant way, then I don't really see them being any sort of playoff contender or even a play-in tournament contender. And that would be pretty bad because, if you're not even in a play-in tournament situation, you're talking about being the 11th seed or lower, which is essentially bottom of the barrel in the Eastern Conference. So if things don't rapidly improve for Toronto, I think that they could potentially be looking at some trade suitors to move off their contracts to maybe start a rebuild in Toronto. I just don't really see it as a sustainable formula with what they have at their disposal right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if they get the right offers from some teams that are looking at guys like Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby, that they could potentially pull the trigger on some of those trades and maybe start a rebuild in Toronto. So, yeah, when it comes to me specifically, I'm going to go with my team that's going to try to acquire somebody in the trade deadline as the Golden State Warriors, and my sellers are going to be the Toronto Raptors. That's just how I see it.